Welcome to the Art of Lifting podcast. Today I'm joined by Lewis. Did you want to just introduce yourself?
I am a powerlifting coach for Forza Performance, which is what I am head coach of, and also with GB on the junior team and the university team. I've been coaching for around, I think, 10 years next year. So that's probably as much detail as you need who people that don't know me.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. I'm just being attacked by the dog for anyone that's not watching. My first question for you was actually going to be, when did you get into powerlifting? We'll talk more about coaching stuff, but I know you've been on the scene since before I started, because you were one of the first coaches I kind of heard of when I started in like 2018. But when did you actually start?
I ran my first powerlifting program in like 2012. I did Candito, what's it called? The 6-week program. That was the first ever powerlifting program I heard of. So I actually started powerlifting in 2012, which was actually way longer than I thought it was. I thought it was soon enough, but it's not. So I started actually strength training before that. So I ran loads of like random programs, and then I actually started powerlifting, like training wise, in 2012. I didn't compete until 2016 because I didn't really understand it. I didn't really get how you competed. Because back then, like, there was a lot of information about it, so you couldn't really like find a meet as easy as you can now. And when I went on like British powerlifting, English powerlifting, or like the East Midlands powerlifting websites back in like 2014, 2015, I didn't have a clue what I was looking at, and it was really difficult to actually get information. So yeah, I started actually training powerlifting in 2012, competed for the first time in 2016, but started like coaching with it like before that. So I actually started coaching powerlifting before I even competed.
I'm getting so distracted by him. Right, so I was about to say, you started powerlifting training in 2012, but am I right in thinking raw lifting was still really new then as well? Because I think the first World Championships was either 2010 or 2012, wasn't it, for Classic?
Something
like it was still really new. So I know when I started in 2018, like especially East Midlands, it's a decent region now. Well, there's mixed opinions, but it's a lot more than it was before. But when I first started in 2018, I remember there was just no information kind of anywhere anyway. So I'd imagine if you were looking into it before 2016, there would have been like hardly anything at all to kind of get you into it.
So yeah, I'm trying to look up when the actual first Classic was, because I can't remember. It's 2012. So 2012. Yeah, so when I ran my first powerlifting program, was when Classic was like the first time it got introduced in terms of internationally. But yeah, before that it was all like equip lifting. I used to follow a lot of equip lifters on YouTube.
Yeah.
Some very controversial people now, but some, like, back then it was all there was. So like, I don't know if you've ever heard of Jason Blaha.
No, I don't think so.
He's a weird dude, but like he was someone that I followed for a while because he did powerlifting. And like Mark McQueen, me and him used to talk on YouTube quite a lot because I used to have a YouTube channel back then, but it was more kind of like me getting into powerlifting. So I used to post all my Candito workouts on there, which I've now all hidden and blocked, so you can't see those because it's not very good. But yeah, classic powerlifting, mate, was not a thing really back then. It only really took off in 2012.
Yeah.
And even like in gyms, no one really did like squat, bench, and deadlifting. It was still like that bodybuilding era, and the only powerlifting you actually did was if it was equipped.
Yeah, no, definitely. So how old would you have been then when you got into it? Was that when you were like first getting into training overall, or had you already been going to the gym for a couple of years at that point?
I was like 15. So how long ago was that? What, we're 2024 now? 12 years ago, 18.
Yeah.
So 18, but I never fucking clue what I was doing, mate. I literally didn't have a Scooby, but like I made
one does
newbie progress.
Yeah.
I literally didn't have a clue what I was doing.
I don't think anyone has a clue what they're doing for like the first at least couple of years, really, do they? Like, let's be honest. Just gonna shut him out. But yeah, no. So you, from what I remember from when I first started, because I feel like a lot of the people I follow from like back when I started were on the uni scene. So I was never part of the uni scene, but I think you were quite big in the uni scene, weren't you? Is that how you first got into coaching, through the uni scene, or?
Yeah, literally, like Northumbria Powerlifting was where I started coaching. So I was doing like online fitness PTing before that, and nutrition stuff before I actually got into powerlifting. And then that's kind of where that kind of coaching side bled into powerlifting a little bit. And merged is a better one, actually. Merged into powerlifting because of because of like the university stuff. So like there was like a few of us that trained powerlifting like 2015 at university, but like there was only like 2 or 3 or 4 of us. And then eventually like the following year there was a club that was founded. So I was still like with these guys, training them and helping with that technique and stuff, and kind of like doing it for free because we just trained together. And then that 2016 year was when the club got founded, and I come on board as like assistant coach and like president of the club, and that's kind of how it kind of grew from there, really.
Am I right in thinking your degree was sport based as well?
Yeah, so I've got a master's in sport exercise nutrition, and a bachelor's in sport exercise nutrition, and a master's in exercise physiology.
And am I right in thinking as well that part of that would have been like injury side as well? Because I feel like at least now, I don't know if it's just from the experience you've gained over the years, you are someone that I would probably say is very good with the injury side as well. Or is that just from experience, do you think?
I think it's both. Like, part of my master's had a lot of rehabilitation work in it. And it was all about like how movement and exercise was used as medicine, because it kind of linked in with the clinical side of exercise physiology. So we had to learn about how like movement and exercise can help like health conditions. And as part of that, like you could do your own work around like muscle injuries or like biomechanical issues, etc. So I ended up doing my thesis on like, I think it was back pain, something to do with like exercise with back pain for my master's. So yeah, like the part of that was linked to like the degrees, but then another part of it, I'd say it's 50-50, like 50% from like university, and then 50% is like from your power cut.
No, my light just went off.
And then 50% was from like kind of learning on my own, but also being in a gym where I learned from physios as well. Like Alex, for example, is a really good one. Another guy called Liam, who I've been doing physiotherapy for years, and Alex leans way more into the powerlifting side of things. So I like working with him along for the last 6 years helped as well. So it's kind of like both. It's more like in-person experience and coaching and like my own development, and then the university side of things as well.
So a question I've got for you then is, when you first kind of went into the powerlifting coaching side, so you'd already been doing like general fitness coaching and stuff anyway, where would you say you learned a lot of the information? Was it mostly through your own training and trial and error? Was there like certain influencers, YouTubers, or anyone that you followed closely other than the equipped guys that you mentioned? Where did you find that you learned a lot of that information?
I reckon a lot of it come from training myself and my own experiences, and then some of it from like people like Candito back then. That other guy that I mentioned before, he had some stuff out like informational bits, but a lot of that information back then was more like equipped side of lifting. And I think some of my thoughts on training come from bodybuilding as well, because I did bodybuilding before I did powerlifting. But like when I first started training, when I was like 15, 16, I did bodybuilding for like 3.5 years. And that's when I got into powerlifting. And like some of the elements of that style of training, I pulled into like how I coach powerlifting as well. But then I think a lot of it was more watching. I watched a lot of YouTube when I was younger, and I watched a lot of like lifting YouTube. And I think then finding out how people moved, I found quite, I don't know how to kind of word it, but I could like watch people lift and gauge how they're moving and how they're doing things, and how I can apply that to someone else. And like someone asked me the other day about like how I learned about like biomechanics and like how people just squat, bench, and deadlift. And the only way I could kind of describe it was like the way I watch people lift and like coach people is how I learn it. I don't really learn it from like an online resource or for a book or like learning it from a course. Most of my like stuff from technique, for example, has come from more just me working with people in person and like myself as well, which I think ties into the injury stuff as well, because I've been injured so much. Like that also helps me like learn how to deal with injuries and like what it feels like and how to work around that. But I think in terms of programming, I'd say some of it was like heavily influenced from like watching YouTube, like running programs back in the day, like 531, Candito, like DUP program when that blew up, when Classic kind of blew up. There's another couple of guys, I can't remember their names now, but like I used to be on a Reddit forum as well, powerlifting, and like I used to spam that, read that loads, and learn about programming through that, like submax training. And I think that's why coaching for so many years has like helped a lot, because there's a lot of different like avenues of like learning and thought processes, and how like all that stuff can then be molded into my style of how I coach, or how I want to coach anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, I mean, there's definitely still a heavy bias of trends, like whatever's popular at that time, people still lead towards. But I do think people, and I think you're someone that's good at calling that sort of thing out now as well, like people do still do that, but people call it out more as well, for like you're literally just following a trend. But I guess because you've been around for so long, and I think when I got into it as well, everyone kind of trained the same, and it was whatever was popular at the time, and that's starting to go away from that. But I guess you've seen so many different styles of training in the years that you've been around that you can just pinpoint certain things that have worked for certain types of lifters or for yourself or whatever, and make your own method from that, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think now we're in like this golden micro age. I go on about this all the time, but like we're in this kind of age of like doing the same thing, repeating it, which is fine. But I think stuff like that has a shelf life, and that's when you see then there'll be something new next year, and there'll be something new the year after. We're probably like swinging more toward that traditional style of GPP transition phases, decompression blocks, then into like your normal powder for specificity again. So there's definitely like different trends that are hot at the time, and it's very easy to kind of see those things. Even with like technique, like how people move in SPD, like is a trend as well. Exercise selection stuff is a trend. Programming styles is all a trend. I can't remember what your question was now. What was your question again?
It was basically if you think the fact that you've been around for so long has helped you pinpoint certain areas of each type of training to make your own method.
Yeah, I think so. And like I did a podcast with a bunch of lads the other week, and they asked me what my kind of like coaching style or programming style was, and I was like, I couldn't tell you. I don't really know how to kind of like describe it other than it being a bit more like undulating in terms of programming approach, but it's more based on feedback from the lifter. So it's very feedback led, but like I'll have my own ideas and biases to start with, and we start with that, and then it kind of is molded based on feedback and but not even like verbal feedback, like visual feedback. So whether that's like looking at people's lifting or seeing like the numbers on the sheet graph, etc. So it's not always just like, oh, this felt good, this felt bad, like can we do this, can we do that? It's more like, because I have some people that send me stuff and they're like, oh, I'll send you something, but I don't know if you want to see it. I'm like, it doesn't matter if you don't want me to see it, I still want to see it, so I want to see how it moves, because then that might influence what we're going to do next block with a different like exercises, different variation, etc. So it is very much like undulating, but with a feedback loop in terms of like the verbal communication from the lifter versus like me looking at how they're lifting as well.
Yeah, no, I really like that answer. I also was then going to ask you, so I know, well, from what I've seen from your lifters that I follow and from yourself, like you're very big on accessories, pushing accessories, not necessarily just specificity all the time. Do you find, because I know with myself, like I'm very big on like almost like a power building style for lifters most of the year. It just depends on when their comps and stuff are. Do you get your lifters to send you their accessories? Because this is something that my lifters hate doing, but I always ask them to, and they just never do. There's
always going to be some I want to see it. So if like I break the accessories down into like, you have your compound accessories. So that might be stuff like leg press or hack squat or dips or dumbbell pressing, shoulder, whatever it might be, right? And then you have your kind of like fluff work where it might be like your triceps, your leg extensions, your, I don't know, lat raises. And then I have like my kind of like movement stuff. So that might be things to do with like rehab or getting it in and out of position. So it might be like a different variation of a split squat that I need them to do because that's going to help their normal squat, or it might be a bodyweight exercise, or it could be like core based. But I think seeing how people are doing things in terms of accessory work is really important, because I've had some people that are like, oh, I've been doing this movement for like 3 blocks. I'm only telling you now because I don't really feel it. I'm like, well, that's a bit late. But then I say, just film it for me. And they film it and show you it. And you're like, this just doesn't look right. And then like, they're not feeling what they're meant to be feeling. So a lot of my lifters, when they start with me, I do highlight certain things I want them to be filming. And then as the blocks change, if there is different exercise I put in, I will say to them, like, make sure you're filming this because I need to see the feedback on this, or tell me how that feels, etc. Because I think it's just as important as your SPD work. Not even from like a power building perspective, but more from just like making sure they're moving correctly. Because like some of the accessories I give people are to influence their technique without me actually telling them why it's doing that, which I found really beneficial as well. So like, to answer the question, like, yeah, I think they should be sending you in, but as long as like, I don't need to see like every exercise, every set of like a rope extension or like a lat raise, but like some of these things are really important because it can lead into the bigger things. Yeah, definitely. So back to like your coaching journey almost. So you coached through uni. When you left uni, am I right in thinking you went into the police? Was that kind of a straight away thing, or was that would you coach for a bit first? How was that transition once you left uni? What was coaching? Because I always assumed you were a full-time coach. I think it was only about a year or so ago I realized you weren't a full-time coach. Obviously you are now, to start with, like when I was following you and stuff. So what was that journey like to then get to full-time? Well, I did it at uni for 2 and a bit years. Then I actually joined the NHS. So I ended up becoming, I was a respiratory physiologist. So that's to do with like breathing, diagnostic testing, and like lung disease and lung function. And I did that for 8 months, still coaching. And then I joined the police after that. And I was in the police for like almost 4 years. And then left the police in 2022, I think, but still coaching on the side. So like at uni, it was fine. I only had a roster of like 8 or 9 people, just people in the club. And then when I left uni, I started getting people outside of my university. So when I was in the NHS, and then that kind of grew to like maybe 12 people. But back then, even still, like online coaching wasn't like this huge thing. It was still like growing. So there wasn't like a massive demand. And also I kind of capped myself because I didn't want any clients because I couldn't have the time. So with the NHS stuff, it was fine because I was only working like Monday to Friday, like 9 till 5. And then I go train after. And then like most of my clients are my friends anyway. So it wasn't like a big deal. And then like more demand started coming in. And then I ended up quitting the NHS job, going to the police. And then kind of, I didn't put coaching on the back burner, but I kind of reduced it down and just let it kind of like simmer for 2 or 3 years. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And like more people were demanding, like, well, the demand of coaching went up. And then obviously online coaching grew. So in the police, it was really difficult because of the nature of the work that you're doing and also the shift work. So kind of balancing policing with coaching was really, really hard. And then I think I hard capped it like 20 people. And then towards the end, it was like going to bed at like 2, 3, 4 in the morning after shift work whilst trying to do my normal job, then coaching as well, and like writing programs, making sure everyone's replied to, and still trying to give a service, which got really difficult towards the end because it was just so much like time consuming. And then like my training just took a big nosedive when I was in the police. So that kind of like went out the window a little bit. So like trying to manage that was really difficult. But I think coaching with a full-time job, especially like shift work full-time job, is really hard because of the demands of that job. And then obviously I left, and then that's when I started Forza, and it kind of grew even more. So
yeah, no, I agree with the full-time coaching, obviously, and full-time work and balancing coaching. Like I was in 9 to 5, so for me it was easier because I had schedule, I had routine, and I knew where I was and when I was going to be there and stuff. But it's one of those things where something does get less focus, and it's probably going to be the job that you have to manage your time yourself. Like it's going to be the self-employed side, isn't it? So like that's where like going part-time and stuff for me now, like I've noticed a massive change, and I have more like actual focus time on coaching, and it's obviously a lot easier. I also remember when I decided to go part-time, Lily messaged me and was like, oh, you're not doing a Forza and just gonna throw everything up in the air and go head dive into full-time coaching.
That was when it happened. So I was meant to like, I was prepping for the English, and then I arranged to drop my hours down like you did. And then I did the English, and then I had like a massive mental breakdown in the car to Lil, and I'm going off sick for like, I think 6 weeks. Because I just couldn't go back to work, mate. I was mentally just fucked. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I ain't going back part-time. I hate this job now. I'm going to go all in on coaching. I've got enough savings to last me like 6 months. So if it all goes tits up, then I can go back to the police. Because basically when you leave the police, you have 5 years to go back. So even like now, if I packed up coaching, I can go back and work in the police and do whatever I want to do. But I was like, sod it. It's a risk, and I'm going to take it. And yeah, it was meant to be a slow transition. But I was like, I ain't fucking doing this anymore, mate. And it was so weird going from like policing coaching to coaching full time, because like my daily schedule and like my time was always like I'm working constantly, and then going from working like at 100% all the time down to like maybe 30% was so weird. It took a lot of like adjustment, but yeah, like that was a bit of a risk, but it's obviously paid off.
I think as well, it's one of those things where you don't have a choice but to make it work. Like obviously you had a backup if it didn't work at all. But I think when you don't really have a choice but to go, like you had to go all in, and obviously it worked because you didn't have that safety net behind you. You had no choice but to double down and just try your best to do it. And obviously it's paid off. It
was literally like, is my mental health worth the risk, basically? And I was like, I need to do it for my insanity, because it was, mate, I was in the fucking gutter. Like it was so bad. So like, I think that's what swayed me more. And also stuff like we already own a house. So we've owned this house now for almost 4 years. Like I've got a mortgage. So like, I don't need to worry about being self-employed and kind of going down that route, because it's really difficult to like do these things as you get older, like in terms of buying a house and stuff when you're self-employed. So I really take that off. So I was like, well, I can kind of do it, and it's not going to affect me in terms of these like other adult things you need to consider. Yeah. So I'm glad I've fucking done it.
I mean, I'm not surprised. It's obviously worked out well. Yeah. My other question to do with kind of that sort of thing was, you beforehand, am I right in thinking you were kind of just coaching under your name? You were just coaching under Lewis, like that was your thing.
Yeah.
And then you created Forza. What was the decision behind creating Forza rather than just continuing as you were?
I wanted to distance my name from the brand of coaching. So like, it's not to like cuss out anyone who does that, because if that's what you do, that's what you do. But like, I wanted my coaching to be away from my own name. So like it's not linked to the actual coaching page or the business itself for a few reasons. More like if, say for example, I built Forza up and then I eventually sold it, right? And I was like, this is the coaching, this is the business, someone else can deal with that now, I can then walk away. That was one reason. The second reason is like, if I want to have a brand where it's not really like, I don't know about you, but like if I see someone's brand and it's kind of linked to their name, I instantly associate to that person and then what people think of that person. So like, say for example, if I left Forza, but then 3 coaches took it over and it's their brand now, like it's not linked to me. Whereas I use Pape as the example, right? Because Pape's called Team Pape, right? If Pape left that and then someone else take it over, it'll be under his name still. Or if someone like looked at for coaching and like they weren't overly keen on him for whatever reason, and they saw Team, they're straight away they're going to go away from that. Whereas like they might not say they don't like me or have a very good opinion of me, but then they look into Forza and go, oh, actually I quite like this, and they see it's me and they go, oh, okay, maybe I'll give it a chance. That was another reason. But yeah, mainly just to kind of like distance myself and my name from the brand itself. So then if I did want to step back or I moved on, then I can. And also like what I want, my goal eventually is to like own some sort of like unit or conditioning unit, like through strength training. And if I wanted to build up my brand, I still keep it as a Forza. But the reason I call it Forza Performance as well is because then it becomes like a Forza Performance Center or something like that, which isn't directly linked to powerlifting. It can be many different things. And also it's a lot easier to brand something like the logo I got for Forza than it is going to be like LKS coaching or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like people will buy into that kind of brand more than it would be like your own name. That's not me dissing on Pape like at all, because people love it wasn't, and they love like his like brand and everything. But like I think for me, I just wanted to separate the two.
Do you think as well, leaving it open with Forza Performance, like you said, obviously you can then potentially open it some kind of conditioning unit or something? It doesn't have to be specifically powerlifting. But I guess as well, if you develop into other areas, like obviously at the moment it's powerlifting focused, you are a powerlifting coach, but let's say in 5-10 years, powerlifting kind of isn't necessarily your main focus. Like you might go into, I don't know, Olympic weightlifting, something completely different.
Yeah.
It leaves the door open as well.
This is exactly it. And I said this to Lily when I first done it. That's why I called it performance. Because then say like I did that or did strongman, or I take people under me who do weightlifting or strongman, and we then a coaching brand that I have people working for me that I might have. I'm the head coach of the powerlifting side. I have another powerlifting coach, but then I have an Olympic weightlifting coach. I have a strongman coach. I have a nutritionist, right? That all links into that kind of performance element of it, which then links into the bigger idea of having like some sort of unit or some sort of like facility that all comes under that performance side of things. So it's not just powerlifting, because it's also why I didn't like call it something barbell or like something, I don't know, ex powerlifting coaching, or just that's why. That's like part of the decision making why I called it these things. But finding the brand name was really fucking difficult. It took me ages.
When I told my boyfriend your brand was called Forza, and then I think I mentioned a few days ago that your dog is called Enzo, his first question was, are you a massive Ferrari fan?
Oh, mate. No.
Was that just coincidence?
It's only just coincidence. Like the dog name, the dog name come from like us writing out loads of names we liked. And every day we went into that like list and was like, I don't like that one, get rid of it. And then eventually it was like Enzo and this other one, I think it was like Gunner or something like that. Or like Shadow or something really like random. And we're like, nah, Enzo's the best one, so we kept Enzo. And then Forza was really weird. It's just because like I was looking at, I did loads of like brainstorming stuff. So like I did loads of like mind maps. So like it was, Lily made me do this. And I had like all these different areas of things and all these kind of words like strength and all this other bollocks. And I was like, right, if I like translate them to other words, what do they kind of come down to? And then like Forza was one of them, like FORZA, because that's Italian for like strength and force production. And then, yeah, that's literally the only reason why.
No, I mean, it's a good name. I just thought I didn't even put the two together either until he said the other day, to be fair. And then I was like, actually, that's quite funny. I wonder if that is why.
No,
but no, I can imagine, because that's something I've thought about before, but I don't have the creative mind to come up with a name or anything. I'm like, I just don't think I can do it. And I don't give enough time and effort to actually sit down and brainstorm. I think I need a Lily in my corner to make me do that.
It took me like, I think 3 or 4 weeks to think of the name. Some people get a name instantly, it clicks and they just stick with it. But like, I literally remember when I thought of it, I was doing my brainstorming stuff and I went to bed. I laid in bed, I shut my eyes and I was like, oh, what if I like change the FOR to like a number 4 and put a ZA after it? And I was like, God, let me write this down. And then I just had this woman design me a logo, and that's literally what happened.
Yeah. My other question as well was going to be about if you have any advice for newer coaches. So part of that would be, do you think you'd advise people to maybe go down the company route, or do you think it's there's not really much difference between the two. I've seen newer coaches probably just put your foot in the water, get started. But do you have any advice to people that are probably getting into coaching firstly? And then I was going to ask you if you have advice to people that are maybe coaching quite a few of their friends, kind of in the position you were. They've got maybe 10, 15 clients and they're like, oh, I think I want to dive further into this. Do you have any advice for those people as well? So I guess if we start with more of the beginner coaches and where they can get like information from and learn from in this like day and age.
I think the first thing would be, it's kind of hard nowadays because everyone does it, but my first bit of advice would have been like, don't create a company and think of a name and stuff, because like straight away you're going too deep in the business and you haven't even got the business yet, because the business is essentially people and clients, and you have to build that up to start with. And I think a lot of people, even when they only coach their friends as well, they just want to go, right, I want a brand name, I want to make t-shirts, I want to do this, that, bang, bang, bang. Like, you're just like, we'll just slow the fuck down. Like, this stuff like this takes time. Like, you need to build a reputation. Like, the Barbell Coalition are a really good example, right, of starting from under their own names, coaching people, come together, built a brand, and then kind of built on that brand and then grown with it. And that's taken like a couple of years. The same with like Owen with EST, did the same thing. Like they were coaching for a while, they were PTing, they built a brand, they grew on it. Same with me, same with like Peach and Battalion Barbell. Like all of us have been doing it for whether it's like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? And then we kind of build it from there. You don't want to start coaching like in the first month, or like start coaching a couple of friends within like even a year. Like, don't then go, I need to make a brand, I need to make an Instagram page, I need to be doing X, Y, and Z. Just do it on your own name, on your own page. Post your content, reshare people, post up like case studies, testimonials, whatever it might be, and then kind of let it grow from there. Because reputation and having a few good clients and making them progress and showing that progression is how you're going to get bigger as a coach. It's not just how good your content looks or how nice your t-shirts are or how good your branding page is and stuff, because like that stuff will actually probably put people off the long term, because it comes across as if like you just want to get as big as you can, as quick as you can, because you want to make money. And that's what I think, from someone that's been doing it for like almost 10 years, is probably what I would be the first bit of advice, is that. The second bit to do with like knowledge and growth is like, I think nowadays you've got a lot of people who've been doing it for a while, who will do mentorship stuff with you, or like there are mentorship calls, or like there's mentorship like partner programs or courses, like look into doing those things. Because I say we, like me, Peach, Norm, the BC boys, or whoever else who does mentorship stuff in the UK have been doing it for a while. And if you want to learn from people, that's probably the best way of doing it, is learning that. But equally with that, don't just settle for one person. So like, for example, don't just come to me, like go speak to the other guys, go speak to Peach, go speak to like Owen or whatever, and then maybe look abroad and go do some in America, or some, I don't know, somewhere else in Europe, or like Asia, or Oceania, like all these other different areas as well. Because what you're going to do is you're going to learn one way of programming, another way of programming, kind of what I did, but you're going to fast track it, where like you learn all these different aspects of like training and powerlifting and coaching, etc. And then you're going to have that in your toolbox, and then you can kind of grow and build on there. That's probably the next bit of advice, is like to network and do these mentorship things. Even though like they do cost a bit of money, they are very rewarding and helpful. I've done some before, and like they really do help. So it's like investment for your own development, really. So that'll be like the next thing. And then the third one is just like make use of what's free online as well. Like there are going to be information bits that are free online, but try not to be too heavily focused on one specific person or one specific group of people that offer free advice or free kind of resources, because you are going to be a bit self-limiting there, and you're not really going to build and grow your own ideas. And I said this to the other lads on the other podcast I did the other week, was like, there's just no originality anymore. Like everyone wants to do kind of the same thing. And I think that has a shelf life on it. So yeah, that probably my 3 pieces of advice would be: don't go straight into like a branding side of coaching, like network and learn from people. And then the last one I just said, I can't remember what it was now, but yeah, that last one.
I think it's really good. I like what you said about how like there's not a lot of originality online anymore. Like when you just look at, I don't want to name names, but like when you just look at people's coaching reels and stuff, like I think someone like Peach is a really good example of someone that does put out different content. I think you do as well. I think Pate started putting out content, but who knows. But I was actually going to say, I think since powerlifting now became a thing, definitely, I feel like I've seen a lot of people basically making the exact same reels, but just regurgitating the similar information to them. And it's almost created a narrative that, and don't get me wrong, some of the content is obviously really good and a lot of it does work, but it's almost created a narrative that is the only way to train. Like the 4 week block has to be a 4 week block. It has to be this. You have to go heavy every 4 weeks and things like that, which for some people work. Like I do that with myself. It works. But then like doing this podcast, I think has really taught me a lot. So like when I was speaking to Shao Backland, who is obviously one of the best lifters in the world, he was like, oh no, I go every other week. I do a light week, I do a heavy week, and I just keep repeating that cycle. And I was like, no one really talks about other ways to train online. Like if you're just going to one place, like even if it's just Instagram, but you're only following like American lifters, British lifters, you're probably only going to see one style of training, maybe with a few other bits thrown in there. But I don't know if you agree with that or.
No, I completely agree, because the way I look, so nowadays, when I try to learn more about like bench pressing, it's way more influenced by the Swedish, Scandinavian crowd and the Japanese. Whereas like before it was a little bit more kind of my own thing with like an American spin on it. So like the way I've tried to develop my own approach with powerlifting coaching is to go outside of the UK and the outside of the US. And that's how you're gonna learn different things. Because like you just gave a really good example of that, and people don't really appreciate that. They kind of think you just have to do like a 4 week block. You have to maybe just train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. You have to be running SBD days. You have to be doing all these things. You don't. Like there's so many different ways of doing things. Those ways of doing it are very good because they can make you strong very quickly. But ultimately, there's not going to give a lot of longevity to that. And I think that's why we're seeing like a little bit of that whole golden micro era just slowly dying down a little bit, because yes, it worked because people weren't doing it before. And now they've done it for a year or so. And they're like, I got really strong. And then it's slowly just tapering off again. And that's when you have to start doing different things. So I think you're completely right. It's like there are so many different ways of like learning how to do things, and people don't really. It's why I said like speaking to people in like mentorships and whatnot, and like networking with people outside of your own social circles and just outside the normal people you'd go to, and speaking to others is really important. So like for example, I'm starting with a new coach next week who's from New Zealand. So like his way of doing things is probably completely different to what I've been doing. And I had a call with another lad who I didn't end up going with him, but like his way of doing things was so different to how I did things or do things. But they produce really strong people. So it's like you can't just have like that same style for everybody, because it's not going to work for everybody. And also I think you end up getting a bit of like, you get too comfortable with training, and then that's when you start getting a little bit too neurotic with things if things go badly. So there's a lot of different ways of doing things, but I think to kind of go back to the question, like even like from my own personal viewpoint, I think you have to kind of explore these different things, because even looking at how the Swedish and the Japanese bench and how they program benching has influenced how I kind of do that a bit more now, and kind of made me think about how I used to program back in like, even like 3 or 4 years ago. I went back on some old programs and like, God, like why did I stop doing this? Because this was actually really good, and I kind of got maybe a little bit influenced too much by other things, a bit of outside noise. And that's when it comes back to using like going back to your original ideas, or maybe a little bit more originality in what you think and what you should be doing.
I actually also want to ask you about your bench training, because I know you've been doing crazy high reps and things since your last comp, but obviously you were struggling with pec injury kind of pretty much all year, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Longer than that. And you're now going into ridiculously high reps. And I remember you saying you were going to really change your training up after Commonwealth. And I'm assuming that that's what you've been doing. I just kind of want to ask what you're doing differently and how it's going, because it looks like it's obviously going really well.
So I originally was going to run I basically contacted this guy who's like, he benches like 215 or 220 at 93. It's a Swedish bencher. And he's got a load of like programs online. And I was like, I want to run one of them. Can you like send it to me and I'll just translate it? And he said, yeah, it's fine. So I bought it, translated it all. I looked at it and I ran it for 2 weeks, and it was just too much too soon, I think. It was just too much comp specific benching. And it was a lot of volume, but I really liked the volume. I really liked the high rep stuff. It was like sets of like 10, 15, 20 up. I loved it. But I was like, this is just too much to do too quickly in terms of comp bench. So I was like, let me just change things around. So I basically took the program, or some of the aspects of the program with like volume, and I was like, let me put my own spin on it. So I ended up doing, I think, two like volume days, but one of them was like an incline volume day. And then the other one was like a normal bench day. It's the one you probably see me post on Saturdays, where I do like the pyramid up to a single and then the back offset for a set of like 8, and then I AMRAP it. So that was like my main volume, and more heavy volume was from that. So what I essentially do is like Monday is day 1, close grip incline, sets of 10, ascending up 4 sets of 10. And then Tuesday I do comp bench, ascending 3s on tempo up to RP 7 or an 8, and then do a plus set into a single. So I add 10 kilos, do it for a single, and that's it. No back offs, nothing. And then Thursday I do normal incline bench, like as in like not close grip, just normal grip, but like ascending sixes to a heavy weight. So like last week I did 140, but just fucked it and then did 3 reps. That was my fault. And then the Saturday I do a set of 5, a set of 3, a set of 1, and then a set of 8, and I AMRAP the set of 8, which is what I've been doing, like 140 for 16, 150 for 13, and then this weekend I've got to do 160 for an AMRAP, and I want to get like 12, which would be quite cool. But like touch wood, like I've had no pec issues. The only thing I've been getting is like a little bit of my anterior delts are just like fucking blowing up in terms of just they're sore all the time because there's a lot of incline stuff and there's a lot of high rep work. So like they're not like hurt or like bad. It's just like they're just DOMs all the time. So yeah.
I guess just adapting to that new way of training. I don't know if you were doing like the same thing for quite a long time before, and obviously it's just a bit of a change to the system.
Yeah, so when I did your comp, I basically ran these 2 blocks that peaked me really well. And this is where it comes back to what I keep saying about running the same blocks. Like I found those 2 blocks that work really well and how specific and like kind of where intensity needs to be. But outside of that, because that's before I got hurt, and then I got hurt and I was like, I can't run this same program again. But then I tried to run the same program again and got hurt again because I didn't have the lead up into these kind of phases. So what I've started doing now with my own bench training, or what I was doing and what I've kind of been thinking more about with other people's, is like having these kind of like phases where kind of like what we used to do in training, where it was like you run your hypertrophy and then into like your strength stuff, but it's not like that. It's kind of like you still have your heavy singles and your stuff within these blocks, but you're just pushing volume really hard, but you're capping the top end because of the volume. And then you're kind of coming away from that a little bit, running the kind of blocks you know are working, and then going there, which is what I will be doing with my bench as well. So like after this block, when I start with this other guy, the volume will hopefully come down a little bit because I can't sustain it for more than 8 weeks. And kind of like looking at it as like 16-week phases. You run the volume up, you come back down again, you peak it, then you run it again, etc. Kind of do it that way, rather than just having like, I know this block works in my bench, so I'm just going to keep doing it.
Do you know, I actually really miss the days of like a hypertrophy block and then like more of a strength phase into a peak. I used to love the hypertrophy block so much, but then I guess that's where like I would, like with me, especially like my accessories, I literally have 2 specific days for accessories that I can just absolutely push and focus on. So I still get that, but yeah, I think that was one phase of training I do kind of miss, just having those specific periods. And I do think it's kind of coming back though, to be fair.
Yeah, I think like my voice went there. Yes, is what I was meant to say. Like it definitely is, but I think the way we do it now is like we undulate it a lot better and we have a better understanding of it, which is why we kind of incorporate those things even within like peaking cycles. I have some people that are still doing sets of like 7, 8, 9s on like sumo and squats, because that's kind of how they respond, because you kind of see how their top end responds because of that. And that's, I think, the flaw of like what we used to do, where it was like volume, strength, peak, was like some people responded so well to volume and their top end went up. When you pulled that away, they just tanked. And then the opposite effect was like some people train a lot better in like higher intensity, like rep work. When you have all that volume leading into the peaks, they'll just fuck because of the stuff beforehand, which is what I think like is good about programming nowadays and how we understand programming, is because like we take all these elements and we put it into one and think, all right, this is where we kind of need you to be. And that's how we kind of analyze and see the response from that. But this is why like I think I've really enjoyed the benchings, because like I used to do a lot of like singles and doubles before all this, and I kind of knew what my blocks should be for peaking and just kept running with it. Whereas now it's like the AMRAP work, I just love doing the AMRAPs. I just love doing sets of 10 on bench. Like it feels so good in terms of like, if I know I can bench 160 for 10, like why am I not like doubling over 200? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. It's just like, I think it gives you a confidence boost for when stuff does get heavy. Because even when I do my heavy stuff, I don't really think about it too much now. I'm just like, I want to just do this set so I can go do my AMRAP after.
Yeah, I think the confidence thing is a big thing. It's not the same, but like with my training, like, so I have 2 squat days a week, and on my earlier one in the week, it's always 2 reps higher than my like heavier day, which is towards the end of the week. And I always, whatever I hit on my week 4 on that first day, where it's like this week's going to be 8 reps, I know I can add at least 10 kilos to that for my Saturday session for 2 reps less. And it's like the mental thing of, even if the number scares me, I'm like, yeah, but I've hit this for X amount of reps. I know I have the confidence to go in and hit this. So yeah, I think that pays off. I
completely agree, mate. And it's how I use AMRAPs for, I was actually doing a bit of content on this eventually, but it's how I kind of incorporate AMRAPs for people with confidence issues. I've had it with a few lifters where like they have a certain attachment to like whatever plate is on the bar, or whatever the colors are, or whatever weight is. And then I kind of program that block or the block before to lead into like an AMRAP of that weight, or whatever that weight's going to look like on the bar. So say like, for example, 2 reds on squat, right? Or it might be 140 on a squat, or it might be 180, or whatever it might be, I don't know, 200 on a deadlift, I don't really do it with deadlift, it's more squat and bench, but like those kind of like milestone numbers of that kind of like visual milestone, and then you make them AMRAP it, the confidence after when they do that and they hit it for like, I did it with Flossie, where like she would do 120 because it was 2 reps, and she'd do a single and it's like, it moves fine, she goes to do a second rep, fails it, just confidence issues. I planned the block, made her AMRAP it, she hit it for 5, like fine. And after she's like, oh my God, squats feel great, I feel really good. I'm like, good, that's what we wanted to achieve from this. So it's not always just like pushing volume of it. There's like a lot of aspects that come with it to do with confidence and the mental side of things as well.
Yeah. So another question I have for you then, like programming wise, is do you do AMRAPs a lot with people? My first thought when you said about squat AMRAPs was Liv Price, because her AMRAPs are iconic for how much she grinds out the last rep. But I feel like I saw her doing them for quite a while. Like, is there a certain type of lift you do it with other than just the nervous lifter, or?
Yeah, I don't tend to do, so I don't do deadlift AMRAPs. That's the first thing. I'll never do a deadlift AMRAP. I think the chance of injury when things get sloppy is too high, so I won't bother. With a bench press, I kind of tend to do it for most people, depending on where they are in their phase of training. I found more nowadays, like having AMRAPs incorporated in like blocks after competition or like phases where we want to build volume is actually a lot easier than having like, here, go do a 5x6 or something like that. We can just do like one, sorry, the dog's just walked in as well. We can do like a set of 6 and then take it for an AMRAP and stuff. So like all these different ways of doing it for bench is really good. And usually for people that are a bit more technically inclined with bench, because the variability in position when you start AMRAPing stuff with bench is quite high, like the risk of that's quite high, but it also depends on how much they lift. So for example, if you're someone who benches say 200 and you're AMRAPing 170, like if you start getting to set reps like 7 or 8 and you're moving, you're like, I don't know, out of position, you're over pressing, and then the chance of like your pec and your shoulders blowing up are a lot higher than it is maybe like a lighter lifter who's benching like 50 kilo for an AMRAP. So the chance of it, like the risk of injury is different. When it comes to squatting, like Liv's a really good example. I used to give her squat AMRAPs when I felt like, so I coached her through 2 different phases. So she had like a year out like last year from coaching. And before that, I gave her AMRAPs as well for the same reason. She just like thrived off it. We basically would do like a block of training, say like doubles or triples. And then that week 4 would be the same way as week 3, but AMRAP it. And then like the ability for her to kind of find out grinding positions in the squat, we just got so good at it. And I think that's why her squat top end now, when she does have to grind the last attempt on a squat, is just, she's so good at doing it because she's so used to how that kind of feels. I think that's another thing with people is like, they don't know what failure really feels like until you get them to do an AMRAP at 10, and they have to actually do the AMRAP at 10, and then they kind of know what a grind feels like. So it kind of depends on the lifter. Like if you've got someone who's got confidence issues, or you've got someone who's very technically good at a lift and you want to get a bit more volume in, that's kind of when I would do it. But yeah, there's a few other reasons as well, but I think those are kind of like 2 really good ones.
No, I think they're really interesting examples. And I think the thing that you said about obviously teaching a lifter what an RP10 truly feels like, I think is really important as well. Because I think especially in people's first couple of years, like they are scared to reach that point.
Yeah.
But as long as you're in a safe position, like nothing bad's going to happen. You need to just kind of figure out what that looks like for you, and then you'll know and kind of gauge your top end a bit more accurately as well going forwards, I think.
I feel like it's a little bit with like training, like in the last couple of years has been very much kind of sub-max focused, RP6, RP7. Like you don't want to push too hard because you're going to get injured, all these kind of things like that. There's bollocks. Like you don't have to train like with that mentality all the time, because I think all you're doing is just you're holding yourself back a little bit. And there are phases and blocks in training where you have to try a bit harder, you have to push a bit harder. But I think there's just been a bit of a culture recently where like it's more. Enzo, how's Enzo? But I don't know, like there's a culture of recently where like it has to be a bit more sub-maxy, and we never used to train like that 10 years ago. I'm not saying we would, like the standard now is different, but like you can have these different phases of training, kind of like work it around like that, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I actually agree with you about the culture around basically not maxing out in training and stuff. Like sometimes you have to, and also sometimes it's fun too. And I think some people don't try hard. Like if your end of block single is at 8 should be really difficult. But I think people think, oh, well, if it's at 8, I don't have to try fully, and then they don't go as heavy kind of thing, or they don't push themselves as much. And I think people forget
and they go at 10.
Well, yeah, it's literally one extreme or the other. But I think people forget that it is supposed to be hard work as well. Like it's not supposed to feel easy every single week. Like even if it's not a block where you are going super heavy, like it still shouldn't be really easy and comfortable, or you're not really, unless it's like a deload block or a recovery block or like decompression, whatever. Like you still need to push yourself to be able to get stronger.
But you see, I think that comes from like where people have been before, whether they've like come from like a different sport, like a really hard sport. Say like rugby's a good one, right? They know what it's like to train hard, what it's to be like battered and bruised and feel sore and shit. You got someone that's come from bodybuilding where they push everything to failure all the time, or you've got someone who just like kind of went to the gym, didn't really do much, and then they got into powerlifting because their friends did it, and then they don't really know what failure feels like in terms of like muscular failure, not like as in like life failure. I mean like they're failing a lift, like they don't know what that kind of feels like. And I think that's when like using stuff like AMRAPs or high rep work to like at 10 and like pushing them to that kind of like level of discomfort and pain, because like don't get me wrong, like going at 10 on stuff is not easy, especially like when you're grinding reps out on accessories, for example. Like learning how to do that, I think, is a skill in itself, and I think it's a little bit lost on some people recently, or like nowadays anyway. Like people don't go as hard, and they worry like, oh, I went really hard on like I don't know, an accessory on a Monday, like my squats on Saturday are going to be so my primary week 4 is so ruined. Like fuck that, like it doesn't need to be like that.
No, I completely agree. I think people get in their heads about it, don't they? And it's more of a mental thing. Like I know I got some raised eyebrows with my squats because I always push my 2 squat days fairly heavy. Like on my week 4, my RP on both squat days is pretty similar. My Saturday might be a little bit harder, but there's not much in it. And I used to always pull back for comp week, and because everyone was like, oh no, you shouldn't go that heavy like 4 or 5 days out from comp because it's going to tank a squat on comp day. And Commonwealth was actually the first time I let myself still lift at that higher intensity earlier in the week, which is definitely against the normal. And that was the best my squat has moved in a comp in years, because I just did what I'm used to doing, if that makes sense. And some people I think need some intensity, where I think some people are so scared to push earlier in the week. Obviously you don't want to push everything, and certain lifters that won't work for. But I think you need to almost get out of your head. Like if you push something like really, like let's say belt squat on a Monday, and you push it harder than you're supposed to, you still got 5 days to recover probably until your heavy squat session. That's a long time to recover.
Also, like you can adapt from these things. So it's funny you say belt squat on a Monday. This block I've been doing belt squatting on a Monday, and I do it after my heavy deadlift, and I squat on a Wednesday and I squat on a Saturday. The first 2 weeks I did it, my legs felt sore as fuck. And when I come to squat on a Wednesday, I was like, Christ, I don't know how I'm going to keep doing this. Week 3, like last week, fine. Squat on Saturday, no pain. Did it this week. I did belt squats last night, same weight, same intensity, like, and I don't feel sore today. Like you do adapt to these things. And I think that's another thing is like people won't give things time, and they kind of want the result or like the effect of it to be very quick. But like it does take a little bit of adaptation time, and some people will adapt to the program rather than, and the program can adapt to them. It works both ways. You just have to kind of trust it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I saw, is it Jason Clark that coaches Evie? Yeah, so I saw him posting a story the other day. I can't remember, he reshared someone that had posted something, and it was about, I think it was to do with like not pushing your training as hard. And he was like, your body will adapt. And I think he used Smolov as an example. Like, I wouldn't advise Smolov bench to anyone or squat to anyone, like whichever one you want to run. But there's a reason it worked. Like people did adapt to it, and you can adapt to kind of anything as long as you're also taking care of recovery outside of the gym as well.
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? It's like you can't run that small or whatever if you're not going to be recovering properly or eating properly or sleeping properly, because then you will get hurt. There is a difference between like pushing through adaptation and coming out the other end with it with that benefit, but you have to be doing things outside of the training to help that. Because like you can't run some program, say like you wanted to push someone 3 times a week squatting, and like they're like, oh, after 2 weeks I'm really sore, but then they're just sleeping like shit and not eating properly. That's probably why. Like it's not necessarily the program, and you can probably adapt to these things. But it's funny you use Jason as an example, because that's who I'm going to be starting with next week.
I did wonder if that was the case. No, that'll be interesting to see how it goes. I kind of want to move on a little bit. I don't know how much more time you've got, but I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about coaching internationally, if you've got the time.
Yeah, go on.
So my first question was, when did you first start coaching internationally? Because I think you competed at Uni Worlds, didn't you?
Yeah, but I coached there as well. So that was like the first real experience of it was like 2017. So like coaching at like the regionals and the nationals before that was one thing, and then going to them comps was totally different. I was like, fucking hell, like what is going on? Like it's a totally different level.
Yeah. So what, that was 2017. So you are regularly coaching internationally now. Like are you always on, like, are you part of the uni team, aren't you? Like the uni?
Part of the uni team, part of the junior team. Not doing the unis next year because it lands on 2 weeks where I can't go away. But But yeah, like the last couple of years I've been on the university teams because like Dan heads it up. So like then me, Pate kind of go as his like assistant coaches.
Yeah. So when did you start making that more of a regular thing? Have you done it since 2017, or did you take a bit of a break from it and then you've now kind of dived into it again?
Literally from going full time. I just never had the time. Like when I was, because basically I'd have to book leave in the police to then go do that kind of stuff. And I was never really like that interested in it because I didn't have the time to kind of dedicate to it. But like coaching full time is how I then kind of got back into the international side of things. Dan asked me, did I want to go on the uni team? I said yes. I approached Jason back, when was it? I think the beginning of 2023, and was like, look, I'm interested in getting on the university team. So I spoke to Henry before about the open stuff, and he was like, I think you just need to get a bit more experience. Go like maybe message Jason. So he kind of put me in touch with Jason. And that's when I'd got on the the junior teams. Yeah, did the junior teams. I think that was after. So I basically did like, I think 2022 was when I went to university with Dan. And then I spoke to Jason after that, I think. And then did 2023 was one of the first junior stuff. And then been involved with both of them since.
So when you went in 2017, like you said, it was kind of a bit like, what is going on? Like, would you say you learned quite a lot from that experience as a coach in general? Like, was it, so I don't know what it was like in 2017. I think Uni Worlds is kind of growing, isn't it? But I would still say it's probably, I don't know, it's not a smaller international anymore, but I'm wondering if back then it probably was.
Back in, so 2017 was in South Africa. And to be fair, it was a lot of people. There was a big American, like teams went over. There was like 5 American teams, we had 5 British teams. There was a lot of different other like independent countries that sent out 1 or 2 lifters. So it was still like a lot of people that did it. But like, I wouldn't say it was like massively different to now in terms of how it's kind of run and organized. It's still very similar. It's still an international competition. It's just run a little bit smoother. But like, it was a bit overwhelming from like, you go to a regional and like say someone times out a minute or whatever, you miss an attempt, like they're a little bit, yeah, whatever. But like when I first went to international 2017, it's very much the rule is the rule. Like there's no deviation of that. And I think that was like when we were like, oh Christ, like we need to kind of like buck our ideas up a little bit. Because then we went the following year to 2018 Uni Worlds in like Pilsen, and it was the same thing. Like it was just like, you do something wrong, they don't give a shit. Like that's your problem, not theirs. So it is definitely an eye opener, because sometimes at regional level competition, if you only ever handled it at regional, then going to an international, like the difference is so different in terms of like what's expected of you as a coach or a handler. And it's kind of the same now with like nationals over here. Like we are very much like the letter of the law is like, that's what you need to be doing. Like there's no, just because someone knows you're friends with someone doesn't matter. Like you need to be doing things as per the rule book. And that was the main difference, I think, when going back then to those comps, was like there's no leeway on things. Like if you weighed 50 grams over, they're not going to put you back into the weight class below. They're going to be like, nah, that's you done.
Yeah, no, of course. What would you say is your favorite thing about coaching internationally?
I think it's networking, but like more from a aspect of like just meeting new people and speaking to people about different ideas. So like when we went to Estonia, we met loads of different people, but like that was when we got really good mates with some of the Swedish lot, and that was when I started asking questions about benching and stuff. So like I think from that aspect, that's what I love about the internationals, is like the networking side of things, like meeting new people, like chatting to them about powerlifting, like gaining their like kind of viewpoint on things and just learning different things. Obviously the second one's like going abroad and like getting to see all the lifters lift on the international stage and everything, and being part of that, and like them doing really well and you being like, it's quite rewarding. Yeah, I'll probably say both of those 2 things. I think it's like, it's rewarding to see the lifters do well. Obviously help like the GB team as well, but then the networking side of things is like a big thing for me as well.
Yeah, of course. Am I allowed to ask if there's a least favorite thing other than money?
Yeah, the funding. Some of the hours are a bit long. Like Estonia was hard because it was, I think 6-7 a.m. weigh-ins, and then you don't finish till like 9-10 p.m. some days. Sometimes the hours are really difficult. Malta was actually the most recent. Was that the most recent one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. But like, was it Malta? Was another one between? I've done so many this year, but
Malta, they were too close together, weren't there? That's why I'm getting confused. But I think Malta was most recent.
I didn't do Czech Republic. I know that. I was because we were in South Africa. So yeah, like Malta was a good example of that, because the schedule was so spread out. So you actually had some downtime. So like me and Owen actually had a bit of time to like go chill by the pool or go to the beach, or just like, just relax a little bit, right? Because we are paying our own money to get there. Like the Malta thing cost me and him, I think, £900 for a hotel and like another 300 quid for a flight, and then you've got all your money when you're there. Spend like 2k. Like it's a lot. You can throw a lot of money at it. So I think having a bit of like downtime is really important. So I think that's the only negative, is sometimes they are so full on, you don't get any time to kind of relax. But that's more from a perspective of like, because we're paying the money to go do that, it would be nice to just chill out a little bit rather than just like paying the money to go there and just working the whole time and come back again.
Yeah, no, of course. That kind of links into one more thing that I forgot I was going to ask you about and talk to you about, because you were the first, we actually briefly spoke about it before we actually started filming this, but it's to do with annual leave, because you're probably the first coach that I actually saw publicly talk about coaches taking annual leave. And you're one of the people that made me not feel guilty for doing that. And so I just want to ask, like, because coaching is, especially over the last few years in this country, like, it is a career, it is a job. And I think that's something people forget in like I'll reply like instantly, I'll reply 24/7, like I'll do this, I'll do that. And then it's like they work when they're away. And I think that almost makes the clients not see it as work for you, which almost creates like a maybe like a negative boundary, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like, it depends on how professional you are, I think, to start with, because some people who coach they don't hold themselves to a level of professionalism that I think they should be holding themselves to, because that then creates this disconnect between the client and the coach. And that's when I think the clients might start just like pushing a little bit, and just like they're not reading the boundaries as much as kind of where you want them to be. And I think that's where the first thing is, like, you need to start having that professional boundary with certain like people. Like, you obviously, like, you make friends and stuff, you have a bit of banter and whatever, but like you need to still make it very clear, like, you are the coach, they are the lifter in that aspect, because like they are paying you for a service and you're providing that service as a business. And I think for me, like, having annual leave is really important for that, because that still comes in, like, it is a job, it is a career, like you said, and you have to have downtime. You can't just be working every day of the year 24 hours a day. But I think that comes down to like how well you actually run your business and how professional you are as a coach as well. So like for me, like, I have my response times are between certain hours of the day, Monday to Friday, and then on the weekends it's kind of like any time before a certain time, and that's when you'll get a reply. But they know on the weekends I'm really busy, so sometimes I might not get a reply to the following week. But like, these are all expectations I set up with people when they first start with me, and I think people kind of use the whole 24-hour thing to start with replies, because it sounds good that people want that constant like feedback. But I think what people who I work with who realize this is like, sometimes not having a response for a day or two actually leads to a better response. Because like 24-hour replies doesn't mean like that person sitting there and watching everything and analyzing it properly. It might just be them looking at their phone, giving you a thumbs up emoji, saying this is good, and that's it. Like, that's not really feedback. That's not 24-hour feedback. That's a reply to say they've acknowledged what you've done, and that's it. Whereas like, I had this chat with Peach, because Peach does like twice a week check-ins, I think, on for his lifters. But like, he sits down and looks at everything, and like Jason, who I'm working with, he does once a week like feedback, and he will sit down for an hour, go through your program, go through your videos, and give you like a video like, feedback thing. And like, for me, that's way more I can't think of the word. It's way more thought out, and you give a better response rather than just looking at stuff on a whim. And I find I've had coaches before where like they responded so quickly, it was very evident they were actually not really watching or taking everything in properly. Whereas if you sit down for maybe 10-15 minutes and then look at one person's stuff, when you're sat at a laptop and you're in a professional setting and then doing it, it's a bit different. So then that all again comes back into the whole professionalism side of things, which then leads back into then you should be taking leave because it's still a job, etc. But yeah, I think you shouldn't feel guilty by taking leave. Like, no one should, especially if you do it full time. Because I know Peach does it. Peach takes a week off. Like Jason as well. When I started with him, he's like, look, I'm not working for 2 weeks. This like I don't work weekends either. I'm like, that's fucking fine with me, mate. Like, you do that. I think as long as you tell these people ahead of time that's what you do, then that's fine. And even with people that I've been working with for like 4, 5, 6 years, I've never really took any leave before. I did it this summer. I took like 4 days off. I just needed a break. I did so many comps and internationals. I told everyone 2 weeks in advance, look, I'm taking 3 days off here, 4 days off, whatever. And they're like, yeah, that's cool. I don't mind, whatever. As long as the programs are done and they've had all their recent replies up to date, then they're cool with it. And the same with this next week. I just put a reminder out to everyone, because I let them know back in, I think November, like start of November. I was like, look, just so you're aware, next month I'm I'm coaching these days, but for Christmas I'm having the offers leave. Like, I'm not responding between Monday and Friday. I'll finish work on this Sunday, so 22nd, and I'll come back to work on 28th. Like, don't message me. Like, your programs will be done. I'll have all your feedback done, and I've just done an update on my what's it called, my close friends thing, like I told you at the start, basically saying like, look, reminder on Sunday was the last time you can contact me until like the following weekend because I'm taking leave. And if someone doesn't like that, then I don't think that's necessarily the right person you should be working with anyway, because I know I would have, if someone had a problem with me taking time off work, then I don't really want to be working with that person.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think there's a few things there to touch on. I think one thing I also find as well, like talk about the quick replies, like when I first started, I was always like, I'll reply within 24 hours, I'll reply, and now I'm like 72 hours, but I'll try and reply within a day where I can.
Yeah.
And I actually think like with some lifters I work with as well, I'm sure you probably get this in like some people, maybe if they're quite anxious in the gym, they'll send you so many messages while they're actually training, while they're training and while they're lifting. And it's just almost like that's their distraction from the fact they feel anxious. So they'll keep messaging and messaging, and you'll get so much through that if I reply straight away, it's actually worse for them because it then kind of like feeds into that. Where if I just leave them until the next day and then I'm like, okay, well, how did you actually feel? I'll get a better quality answer as well. Like there's no need to reply to people straight away, or like if they're not sure what weight to, like I tend to give people a range and roughly what RPE it should feel. And I like them to be able to make that decision for themselves. So if I'm sat there and I'm replying constantly, like if someone's got a really heavy session, I'll make sure I'm like available just in case. But like generally speaking, I'd rather them make that choice on their own, because then I know if I do have time off, I have nothing to worry about because they're then more independent, and it's that accountability for themselves and autonomy as a lifter, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes them more autonomous. But like I've had it with some people before where, like you said, they get so anxious in the session and they'll send you stuff. I will purposely leave that until they finish the session or even the next morning. And then I've said to them, look, like I've noticed this in your lifting over the last like couple of weeks. Like I have to give it a while. If it's someone brand new, I'm like, look, I let it slide and just to kind of see what they're like. And you kind of read what their personality is like with powerlifting and how they approach training, which I think is a big thing. This is when it's important to coach the person, not just the program, because then you read how they respond to things. So I had it with some people who like, they would send me stuff and I'd go, look, right, the way you are talking about yourself in the sessions negatively impacting what you're doing after this. So why don't we try, you film your stuff, you don't watch it, you don't send me it, you don't say anything, you get home, give yourself an hour or maybe the next morning and then send it. And they did that, and then their training went up. Like their kind of response to training was better, their mental attitude to training was better. Like now they're really good and they can be really like kind of objective with things. Whereas I think you're right, like in the moment people get way too emotional with it and they get way too anxious about things and they end up not actually finishing the session sometimes. And I think it just negatively impacts the way they kind of approach training in general.
Yeah, and the next thing I was going to say about as well is I liked actually that you said like Jason, for example, doesn't work weekends. And as you said that, I was like, to be honest, there's not really a reason for, especially a full-time coach, to work a weekend. Like if it's how you want to have your week, like that's absolutely fine. But realistically, like, do you need to work 7 days a week as a coach? Like that's why for myself, like I give 72-hour reply time. So I'm like, okay, well if like generally on a Saturday I probably won't work as much. So I'm like, oh, Saturday's basically my day off. Then I'll program Sundays and Mondays. But like realistically, there's not a reason for that. But I think it's that thing when people first start, they do feel like they're going to get more business if they're available all the time. But actually, I think lifters appreciate that they're spending their money. They'd rather work it with a more professional system almost.
Yeah, I completely agree, mate. Like, but for me, I work the weekends, but my weekend is kind of like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So like today's a bit different because I've had calls all day, but tomorrow I've got nothing on. Thursday I've got nothing on in terms of like coaching other than a few replies. But like I don't really mind doing that. And to me, it still gives me my whole day to do stuff. And then the weekends, sometimes like I might get all my programming ahead of time. So like I think 2 weeks ago we were busy on Sunday, or like I just wanted Sunday off. So I did all my programming before on Friday, Saturday, and then did all my replies. And then I did nothing on Sunday. I didn't do any replies, didn't do any programming. And then Monday I got back up with it because I have that, like you, I do 48 hours, but like it's more to give me a little bit of leeway sometimes if I just want to, or like I'm too busy, which is why, again, I think 24 hours is not good, because when I onboard someone, I say, look, my response times are like 48 hours, but like usually it's like same day or the next day. And I explain why it's 40 hours and they're like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I know you need your time. And for me, that's a green flag straight away when you work with someone. But yeah, I think having that like a leeway with your response timing and stuff is really, really key.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I also just thought of one more thing that I was going to ask you about, but it's just slipped out of my head. So I'm going to leave it because we've been speaking for a while anyway. Is there anything else you wanted to cover, shout out, speak about? I don't know if you have any spaces at the moment or if people can inquire and things like that.
Mate, I'm pretty much full, to be honest. I've had a few people. I'll let you, if you still want like coaching, you want to reach out to me and stuff. Like, I'm more than happy to like speak to people. But it won't be like until the new year, like, in terms of like coaching availability. But I've had some people inquire recently, and I've said that to them, and they're like, "Yeah, it's fine." So I still have the call, and then when the spot comes up, I'll just take them on. But yeah, there's nothing like immediately available. And then other than that, mate, like I do my own mentorship stuff. So people are interested in mentorship stuff, they can always reach out and speak to me. Or if they just want to ask me a question over Instagram, I don't really mind. That's fine.
I think that was what I was going to ask you about, was the mentorship. I think I was just going to literally ask, like, so you've been doing it for a while, haven't you? But I think you started advertising it again recently, possibly. Could be wrong with that.
I started doing it properly September, so not even like that long, like 4 months. But yeah, I've been doing it 4 months. I kind of recently advertised it. I think was it last month, something like that. But I've been working with people. I've got some people that I do calls with every month, like twice a month, and then I've done it with people in Australia, America, Europe, EB, so like kind of all over. But I really like it, mate. It's really good. It kind of like makes me think a little bit more critically as well. Like when we like highlight things. Yeah, I really like having the mentorship calls.
I feel like that's probably as well a really good way to kind of branch out and increase business and have a different area within your business as well, rather than just coaching people specifically. Like having that mentorship side, it kind of, like you say, it helps you think a bit more, but it also adds more value to what you have to offer as well, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it's like my goal is eventually to, like I said, that whole unit side of things, but go down the educational side of things as well. It's why like me and Owen, we're doing our handling seminar in February, and tickets go live in a couple of weeks. So like that's another thing. Like I want to kind of go down that route as well. So it's just like another way to kind of dip my toes into this, see if I like it properly, and then kind of maybe lower the coaching a little bit, up the mentorship side of things, up the educational side of things, and kind of go into that a little bit more, so that I kind of diversify the business a bit rather than just coaching.
I think that's a really cool kind of avenue to go down. I did think of the actual question. It was, I don't know if it's a controversial question. I don't think it should be, but I saw people talking about it. I think it was after the English, because, well, they just were. What is your opinion on coaches charging to handle people? Obviously, people that aren't your clients, fair enough, but more if your clients need a handler. What is your take on this?
Well, you paid me for handling the other day.
You're not my coach, though.
Oh, as in like your own coach?
Yeah, because this is something that was a lot of opinion. I don't know if you ever saw it. I think it was after the English, because I think one quite big coaching company, controversial coaching company, if that gives away who it could be, were charging quite a lot for their lifters to have handlers.
I didn't know that. As in like their
clients.
No,
within that company.
If I onboard someone or whatever, I will always say like any national comp I go do, any regional comp is like, it kind of depends on my availability and like if I want to like get, because some of these comps are so far away. But I would never charge my own clients for it. The only exception to that is like I've had it where where did I go to? I went to Ireland to handle 2 years ago, and I said to the girl, I was like, look, I can't pay for the flight, whatever. And she was like, oh, I'll cover it. And I was like, if you want me to come and you want me to handle you and you're happy to do that, by all means, like I will come. But I was like, I can't afford to pay for a flight and hotel. And they were like, oh, no, we'll cover it if you want to come. And I'm like, that's fine, because they're offering. But I would never go to them like, you need to pay this for me in order to come to this competition. Because I think that's a bit out of order, because they're already paying you. It depends how you advertise your coaching, right? If you're advertising your coaching as like programming, response times, and game day handling, there. If you're advertising your coaching as programming and like feedback, no handling, that again, that's kind of fair, because like as long as the lifter knows that they have to pay an additional fee for the handling, I think it's a different story. But if you're advertising handling within your coaching service and then saying, no, you need to pay this, I think it's a bit different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. Like the only thing I will ever say is, because of the fact that I live kind of in the middle of nowhere, I will ask for petrol, like money towards petrol, but I would never expect my client to actually pay me to go there and be there, because also it's a networking opportunity for coaches as well. Like
this is it.
It's a good, and also if you're coaching, shouldn't you enjoy that part?
Well, this is another thing that I think, especially if you're new, you should be going to do these things, because like game day handling teaches you a lot, and it actually teaches you a lot about your lifter as well. Like you'll see how they lift in person, especially if you've only ever seen them lift online. Like I think you should enjoy going to do those things, because it's part of powerlifting coaching, and if you want to get good at it, you kind of have to do these things. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on whether the coaches have said to them that's what's part of their coaching service or not. Because if it's not, and they're saying, look, you need to kind of pay me to go handle, then it's kind of on the lifter then, because they're aware of that. If they're like, oh, you said you were going to come handle me, and they go, yeah, but actually you need to pay for me to come, then it's a bit like, you shouldn't really be doing that.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that, like, it's a bit of a weird, like, grey area almost, but I think, like you said, it's transparency, isn't it? Same with any part of your business. Like, if you say to them on the inquiry call, I charge X amount to handle, then they'll know. But if you're, I think there was, I'm not going to obviously name people, but I think basically there was a company that is it's a controversial company. And when I tell you off the call, you'll realize why I've said that. But they're quite a big company. And I think they were just like almost last minute telling their lifters they had to pay a fee to be handled. And it was like, why would you do that such last minute? Like, you've been planning for this comp, like you'd mentioned that earlier on.
I didn't even know that happened, to be honest. I know nothing about it.
I think that's also probably because you don't look at anything to do with this business.
No, probably not.
But no, that's fine. That was all my questions. So if you've not got anything else to shout out, I just want to say thank you, obviously, for hopping on.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it. I just want to say the seminar again is going up in January. Like, literally, we're just doing like a game day handling seminar. So like, if anyone does want to like come along and learn a little bit more about handling or like game day strategies or what it's like to handle internationals and just kind of see a different side of things, then me and Owen Leggett are going to be doing a seminar in Lincoln. So if people want to come do that, then they can always reach out to us, or there's like I think there's a pre-registration form in our bios to kind of fill out. But that's pretty much it, mate. I appreciate you asking me to come on the podcast.
No, of course. Thank you for joining me.